Good afternoon. While all eyes are focused on the conflict in Gaza, there's been a lower intensity conflict on the northern border that threatens to escalate into a wider war. Hezbollah has been trading fire with the Israelis across the Lebanese border in support of their Palestinian ally Hamas, and even well before the war broke out on October 7th. Since the war, the danger has been enough for at least 61,000 Israelis from the north to have to evacuate their homes and live in temporary residences, such as one room crowded and into a hotel. And estimates have varied. FDD has said 100,000 Israelis from the north have had to evacuate. Yesterday, in front of thousands of enthusiastic supporters, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah gave a speech in which he warned that if Israel decided to wage war in Lebanon, those displaced from Israel, quote, will not return, and Israeli officials should, quote, prepare shelters, hotels, schools, and tents for 2 million people. Also yesterday, the French Foreign Minister, Stéphane Soudan, submitted a written proposal. Stéphane Soudan submitted a written proposal for Hezbollah's elite Radwan unit to retreat 10 miles north of the border, to which Nasrallah responded, quote, you read the paper, it's nothing. There's Israeli security. Many members of Israel's cabinet, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, has threatened a wider war. He said to the Israeli Air Force last week, quote, point the noses of our aircraft northward. And last week, Israeli Foreign Minister Israeli Katz warned that, quote, time is running out to reach a diplomatic solution in southern Lebanon. Israel will act militarily to retain the evacuated citizens in its northern border area if no diplomatic solution is reached, he said. We're most fortunate to have with us today, once again, perhaps one of the world's leading experts on Israel's northern border, Lieutenant Colonel of the IDF in Reserve, Sarit Zahavi. Sarit Zahavi is the founder and president of ALMA, a wonderful nonprofit and an independent research and education center specializing in Israel's security challenges on its northern border. Sarit continues to brief hundreds of groups and forums ranging from U.S. senators, congressmen and women, politicians to senior journalists, and visiting VIP groups in Israel and overseas. Sarit scripts numerous position papers and updates updates focusing on Lebanon, Syria, and Israel's national security challenges. She served for 15 years in the IDF, specializing in military intelligence. Sarit holds an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from Ben Gurion University, and her unique achievements led her to be selected by the Jerusalem Post as one of the top 50 most influential global Jewish personalities of 2021. It's indeed always a privilege and an honor to listen to Sarit. So Sarit, yesterday Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah doubled down on his threats against Israel, saying all options are on the table. Our eyes on Gaza as we fight on the border. If you widen, we will widen. If you intensify, we will intensify. He also said, quote, you will have to find a place to shelter 2 million people from the north. How serious is Hezbollah about taking on the IDF?
Serious, but I must say there is nothing new in this speech. Okay, Nasrallah pretty much set the rules of engagement in this conflict from the first day until today. And he joined this campaign in October 8th. So there is war in the north in a different scale than Gaza, but there is war in the north since October 8th. And actually, Hezbollah had the interest to deteriorate the situation on the northern border of Israel to war before October 7th. And I think that, as you can learn from his speech, this interest didn't change, except Hezbollah doesn't want to go to war on behalf of the Palestinian cause. And after seeing what is happening in the world, I think it is also not interested in going to war without a good reason. Like, it will be much easier for it to present a narrative that Israel opened the war rather than Hezbollah opened the war. So this means that what Hezbollah is trying to do is to drag us into war, putting Israel in an unbearable situation. It's funny, we used to have a simulation here in the Alma Center to groups that used to come, and in the news break, we said Hezbollah put the people of the North in an unbearable situation. This is exactly what Hezbollah is doing now. You mentioned the 60,000 Israelis that were evacuated. I just want to show you a map of how it looks like. If you can just make me host, we'll be able to present that. Meanwhile, I want to say that today and yesterday were rough days over here up north, because we had a soldier that was killed today, a woman soldier that was killed today by the missiles of Hezbollah that were launched all the way to Tzfat. Tzfat is the biggest city in the Galilee. It's 40,000 people. It sounds very small to Americans, but in Galilean terms, it's big. It was a barrage of rockets in the morning today to Tzfat, and we had a few more who were wounded. By the way, and there was a statement by the head of the hospital in Tzfat who said that since this war started, they already treated around 160 wounded Israelis from this war. Yesterday, we had a mother and a 15-year-old son that were wounded in an anti-tank missile in Kiryat Shmona. Kiryat Shmona is the second biggest town in the region. That's 23,000 people. But the difference between Tzfat and Kiryat Shmona is that Tzfat is 15 kilometers from Lebanon, and Kiryat Shmona is maybe 2 kilometers, maybe less. And Kiryat Shmona is evacuated. And this mother and child, they came for some arrangement. They had to come to Kiryat Shmona, and they were directly hit. When it's anti-tank missiles, there are no alerts and no Iron Dome, because the missiles are launched in direct way. You can see it over here behind me. This is an example how it looks like. It missed the vehicle that took the photo. To Tzfat, these were regular rockets, but as you can understand, sometimes Iron Dome miss, and this is what probably, we don't have all the information yet. Probably this is what happened today. So Nasrallah didn't change. These are all threats that we've been experiencing all the time. It's just making a very clear message of the cost. We know the cost of war, but there is a high cost of war, which is the war that we are having today, which is a low-scale war, if I can put it this way.
After the 2006 war, the United Nations passed UN Security Council Resolution 1701, asking Hezbollah to move north of the Litani River. Have they obeyed this at all?
Now, the Resolution 1701 was very problematic because it didn't have a deadline, and the word enforcement doesn't exist in this resolution. So the question is, who should enforce the resolution? If you ask the Israelis, they would say, well, it's the UN, it is clear. And when we say that, we rely on an article or a sentence in the resolution that says that UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force to Lebanon, that was greatly enlarged due to this resolution, and it's 10,000 soldiers now, should make sure that the area of operation, its area of operation, is not used to violent activity. But on the other hand, it is also written in the resolution that, as you said, that Hezbollah, not Hezbollah, it is said that the area between the borderline, the blue line, and the Litani River in Lebanon, which is around 25 kilometers, should be empty of any illegal presence. This includes warehouses, armed personnel, weapons, whatever, uniforms, whatever. Who should enforce that? It is written that the Lebanese Army should that UNIFIL should assist the Lebanese Army establish this area. So UNIFIL has no authority in this. Lebanese Army, this is too much to expect. The bottom line is this resolution was never enforced, and the outcome we see today.
Right, and UN Security Council Resolution 1559, which says that all foreign forces have got to evacuate Lebanon, which Israel did, on May 24th, 2000. It's very ironic. So can you talk
I
about
want to
the
say
relationship?
something about 1559. 1559 is more important than 1701 because it had nothing to do with Israel. 1559 is a resolution from 2004, which is after the Israeli withdrawal. And it called actually the Syrian forces to evacuate from Lebanon. And it called for elections in Lebanon. Both these happened. The third demand from Lebanon in 1559 is the disarmament of all militias, local militias, whether it's Lebanese or Palestinian militias. This didn't happen.
Okay, of course, the world does not remember that. Okay. So can you talk about the LAF and why it's so weak and Hezbollah has tended to dominate UNIF?
There is no compulsory service in Lebanon anymore. The salaries of the soldiers of the LAF are much lower than the salaries of Hezbollah, for example. Eventually, it's all about demography. Around half of the Lebanese, and we don't know the exact data, but around half of the Lebanese are Shiite Lebanese, meaning that they are natural supporters of Hezbollah since they are naturally getting civilian services from Hezbollah. Okay, they are dependent on the services that Hezbollah is providing them. So in this kind of situation, what you get eventually is the Lebanese armed forces that 45% of its combat are actually Shiites that view itself as a kind of, I don't know, a brother of Hezbollah. There is, like brothers, there is sometimes a competition, who is the protector in Lebanon. And sometimes there is coordination and collaboration. In South Lebanon, there is definitely collaboration. I can say I was witnessed myself to this collaboration on the border. I saw Hezbollah taking photos of me while Lebanese soldier is standing next to him, actually securing him. I saw Lebanese army using positions that Lebanon claimed these are Lebanese army positions, but Hezbollah used these positions to observe an IDF exercise in the north. So the collaboration is alive and kicking between Hezbollah and the Lebanese army. Lebanese army actually assisted Hezbollah in hiding its military deployment in South Lebanon, hiding it from UNIFIL. I'll give you a small example from the last UNIFIL report. UNIFIL found aerial shooting ranges of Hezbollah. They found shooting ranges of Hezbollah from aerial patrols that they did from helicopters. They wanted to go to these shooting ranges from the ground, and the Lebanese army didn't enable them for various excuses, and they complained about it. So to ask the Lebanese army to be a buffer between Israel and Hezbollah, which this is the French offer now, this is unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Hezbollah will not allow it. Lebanese army will not do it. And we will find ourselves in the same situation that we were until October 6th.
So it sounds like UNIFIL's function is to report, but not to enforce any of their resolutions.
They are saying that they are not... I'm putting behind me some videos to give you some inspiration of what is UNIFIL and what's the relationship with Hezbollah. I don't know what you can see. But
we're seeing
I can share
the video over, yes,
yeah,
on the left-hand side of the screen.
I'll give you a close look on that in a minute. Can you see the photo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Joseph, is
yeah?
there any way to make it bigger? Yeah.
Sure, I know how.
I'm not sure.
Let's see.
Okay, let's see if you can enlarge it.
That's a UN vehicle that was attacked 2 months ago.
Sarit, if you can, when you click share screen, select that screen to share, and then it should be bigger.
Let's do that. Is that okay?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
So
Thank you,
this
Joseph.
was hit by stones that Hezbollah threw on this vehicle. This is something that happens all the time. This is how Hezbollah is using UNIF presence in South Lebanon as human shields, meaning launching rockets. This is December 10, launching rockets from next to UNIF bases into Israel. Okay, just another example to the area of Kiryat Shmona. This is a video that shows, I'm jumping, it's a long video, that shows a few years ago how Hezbollah military operatives are actually burning and attacking a UNIF vehicle, making the soldiers out of the vehicle, taking their guns, threatening them with their own guns. That way you can understand that actually, even though UNIF is armed, it is not willing to conflict with Hezbollah, it's an ineffective mechanism. Doesn't matter what reason. Hezbollah is familiar with the terrain, and here you can see a UN post where you have a poster of Nasrallah just below. And if I'm trying to find another video, which is from the same UN post, I'll show you. You will see a training of Hezbollah for kidnapping of someone. And this training took place in a UN, next to a UN post that is actually, when I used to take the groups to the border, we used to look at this UN post. It is very, very close. It's like 100 meters from the border. They are now pushing somebody into a vehicle. That's training for kidnapping. Palestinian flag, Hezbollah flag, right next to a UN position. These are just examples from the past year.
Amazing, amazing. You know, we had also done some research on Hezbollah has been working with the Lebanese Boy Scout movement. I'm sure you're aware of that. And these young kids are so indoctrinated to go into Hezbollah. It's amazing, even if they're not Shia. Go ahead.
No, completely, I agree. They're completely indoctrinated. It's part of the problem.
Totally. So about how many incursions of the northern border with Israel have there been? Has it been stepped up since the war began on October 8th?
Look, IDF is not publishing everything that is going on. We feel, and I'm talking now as a resident of the Galilee, we feel that much more is going on than what is reported in the media. And I can tell you, you know, that there are days that we hear a lot of explosions. From my town, you can hear the hits of Hezbollah fire, you can hear the interceptions of Iron Dome, you can hear the Israeli artillery, you can hear the drones, you can hear the jets, you can hear all the voices of war. And sometimes a lot is going on. We wake up from the sounds of the blasts in the night, and nothing is reported. We don't know what was happening during the night. I can say that IDF published in the end of 2023 that Hezbollah already launched 2,000 projectiles, meaning various kinds. Since then, of course, the numbers are much greater because we have every day between average of, I don't know, 7, 8 attacks every day. When I'm saying attacks, it's more than one missile in an attack. In most attacks, it's more than one missile in an attack. For example, the barrage of rockets to Sfat today, we don't know how many. We just know it was a salvo, probably, I don't know. I don't know whether it was a few tens or 10, we don't know yet. Last Friday, it was a salvo of 40 rockets to Sfat, Friday night. Just an example. And this is one attack out of 5 that day.
Right.
And the ammunition that is being used, it's either rockets, like to Tzfat, 15 kilometers, so it's probably rockets, either anti-tanks that I've mentioned, Burkan missiles that are extremely heavy and they're flying very low because they're very heavy, so that's why it's challenging to intercept them, and they create a lot of damage. It's almost half a ton rocket. And and also UAVs, which are very accurate, and not all of them were intercepted. For example, the oldest reservist that was killed in this war was killed up north by a direct hit of a UAV. He was 53 years old. And infiltration tries. I know of at least 2, but there were more, probably many more. Again, not everything is published, but between the lines of the announcement of the IDF spokesperson last week, I understand that there were probably many more. IDF retaliated, and IDF is trying, I think, in a way to gain some kind of a military achievement below the scale of below the full-scale war, below the level of a full-scale war, as long as the negotiations are going on. And that's why they published that they already attacked, and this was right to 2 weeks ago, around 40 headquarters and 40 warehouses, and I think more than 100 squads that were trying to launch these missiles, or around I can't remember, around 100 observation posts as well. And this has been going on. It didn't stop. Like, you know, if I talk about the observation towers that we used to have on the border, and maybe I should put it just behind me, how they look like, all these towers. We would expect that this would be eliminated very quickly. And you see there are more and more and more, because sometimes they are not just towers. This is what we see, but sometimes observation posts could be in buildings, could be in houses. Hezbollah is completely entrenched inside the populated areas of Lebanon, and all this infrastructure is inside homes. It's a great challenge. After what happened today in Sfat, for example, there was already a response, a retaliation of the IDF to an area that usually IDF is not attacking since this war started. You know, as Hezbollah is attacking 0 to 5 kilometers from the border, IDF, most of his attacks, not all of them, but most of them were to these distances. Today, IDF attacked to a distance of around 30, maybe a little bit more kilometers from the border, in an area named the Klimen Tufach. This is north to the Litani River, outside of UNIF area of operation, but a lot of Hezbollah over there as well. So you can understand that even if 1701 will be implemented, it's not going to completely solve the problem and eliminate the threat.
Right, and they have precision-guided munitions, 150,000 to 200,000 now.
No, but not all of them are precision-guided missiles.
No,
So
not all.
yes,
Right.
Most of them are statistic shooting. What is accurate is around 2,000 drones, which they already use probably a few tens of them. It's around a few tens or a few hundred of missiles that are accurate, PGMs, precision-guided missiles, that are to ranges between 100 to 350 kilometers. And the anti-tanks, which nobody knows how much they've got, but they are to ranges of up to 10 kilometers, but very accurate. And, you know, it's a tactical weapon that has strategic meaning today.
So what would it take for the at least 61,000 residents who've had to evacuate the northern communities to feel secure and safe to come back to their homes?
Elimination of the threat. First and foremost is the threat of the anti-tank, and is the threat of Radwan brigades invading to the Galilee. Because what happened to us, and I was not evacuated, but I'm definitely within the range of this risk. Where I live, I feel I changed, okay? Israelis, Hamas and Hezbollah didn't change. They wanted war, they wanted to eliminate us, they wanted to rape Israeli women and to kill Israelis. Okay, this was the reality before October 7th. This is the reality after October 7th. It didn't change. The motivation didn't change. What changed is the Israelis. I was walking on the border every day, and I took these photos, and you know, I never carried a gun. And today I'm not going to go back to these places without a gun. I'm not sure I'm going to take the tourists to these places that quickly. we've changed, and today we demand our government to eliminate the threat, at least of Radwan, at least of the anti-tanks. Now, how do you do that? Everybody's France and the US who are leading the negotiations with Amos Hochstein in the US. The framing, the phrasing is pushback or withdrawal or words like that that has no meaning because the distances are very, very close. Okay, what you push them, what, 10 kilometers north? So how long it would take them to drive back? Minutes. The question, the terms that we should use is disarm. I want to see Hezbollah disarm in these areas. I want to see trucks loading rockets from the homes and driving up the homes. Unfortunately, there is zero chances that I will see this happen.
Do you think that Israel has the capability and the will while it's engaged in the war with Hamas right now in Gaza?
Israel is no. If we don't have a choice, we are capable of everything. Okay? My son told me, Mommy, we are going to win this, but the question is in what price? Smart boy.
Very smart.
And
How old is he?
90.
Very smart boy. Yeah. All right.
So you can understand that we can win this. But of course, the priority, it was the right decision, was Gaza. But we are getting closer to something else in Gaza. Okay, I'm not even saying we are getting closer to the end. Because what is the end? The end is the coming back of all hostages. This can take a while. It's going to take a while. If there is no deal, and it doesn't seem like Hamas is interested in a deal for now, it's going to take a while. Okay? Even if we collapse the control of Hamas over Gaza, which we already did in most areas of Gaza, we still need to bring all the hostages home. And it's going to take a while. So Nasrallah is saying, I don't want to discuss any negotiations as long as there is fire in Gaza. So I don't know exactly what is the point that Nasrallah will say, it is quiet enough in Gaza, I'm willing to negotiate now ceasefire in the north, because as I've said, this is the most comfortable situation for Nasrallah today, that is to put Israel in this dilemma. So Israel will have to decide. What's the point that it wants to bring the people back home, and it is militarily prepared enough after the campaign in Gaza to have another campaign in Lebanon. The biggest question here, the biggest trouble here, is not only the Israeli capabilities. I think this can be solved, if not tomorrow, the next day, if not the next day, the next year. Okay, the question is how much support we are going to get from the United States. That's the biggest question. And we got a lot of support from the United States around Gaza, which was extremely important. But I'm not sure we are getting the same vibe with regard to Lebanon. And I was just interviewed before we met, and I understand that, even inside Israel, but definitely in the international community, the situation here is completely not reported. Okay, I'm still being asked when Hezbollah will join in. It joined in October 8th. Okay, we need the United States with us to understand that if 60,000 Israelis cannot go back to their homes, this has implications on the United States. This has implications of how United States is viewed by Iran, by Russia, by China, how the influence of the United States is viewed in the Middle East, how the power of the United States and the strength of the United States is viewed in the Red Sea. There is connection between all these fronts. And that's why it is extremely important that we both agree on what message we want to deliver also on the northern front over here.
Right. Nasrallah has made several speeches in the past where he's indicated that all of these terrorist proxies of Iran are acting totally independent of Iran. What do you have to say to that?
It's not a complete lie, because if you want to create a metaphor to understand the reality here, you shouldn't use the head of the snake. You should use the octopus. And the octopus has 8 arms. Let's count them. It's Hamas, it's Islamic Jihad. Both of them are in Gaza. Hamas is also in Lebanon. Islamic Jihad is also in Lebanon and Syria. You have Hezbollah in Lebanon. You have Islamic resistance of Iraq. You have more militias subordinate to the IRGC in Syria. You have the Houthis of Yemen. You have the cyber arena. I'll go to 7. And you have Iran itself, which is very careful from being involved directly in this conflict. All these arms received ideology, training, money from Iran, and have different kinds of relationship with the IRGC. Some of them are partners, allies, full-scale, full-time job, like Hezbollah. If I'm taking Google International or Facebook International, Meta International, okay, as Iran, Hezbollah is the most senior CEO of Zuckerberg, okay? And forgive me, Zuckerberg, for this impression. I'm not implying anything here, just to make you understand on a business level. Hamas, it's different relationship. It's a freelance, okay? It's not a natural alliance because Palestinians are Sunnis, and Iran invested a lot of efforts to mobilize Hamas in the past decade, and they succeeded in this. They created a mutual interest. The Houthis, they cultivated them, they equipped them, and I believe the Houthis, you know, they don't need specific order to every specific attack they carry out in the Red Sea. All they needed is a very general order that, okay, you can start the campaign, and that's it. So we don't know what's the level of coordination between each and every militia on a daily basis. What we saw this week is a very good example. There was a visit in Lebanon of Abdullahian, the foreign minister of Iran, who is an archi-terrorist, okay, actually. He met with Nasrallah, and then Nasrallah met with Ziad Nakhalah, the head of Islamic Jihad. And then Abdullahian flew to Syria and had some meetings in Syria. What else should be, you know, and these meetings this week, you know, it's just an example to meetings that are being held all the time between these players and coordinations that are held all the time between these players. So, you know, we tend to give too much credit to Nasrallah saying the truth. Sometimes he's saying the truth, and sometimes he's talking next to the truth. We just need to understand him.
Amazing. All right. So now it's my honor to have my colleague, Joseph Epstein, read some of the questions that have come in from our audience and maybe pose a few of his own. Joseph? Joseph?
Thank you, Sarah. Second. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Sarit, for that amazing presentation. So one of the questions from the audience is that if Israel were to weaken Hezbollah significantly, if that could lead to Lebanese Christians and Druze joining in the fight on the side of Israel.
Wow, I don't know. I'm not sure they will join in the fight, but they would definitely enjoy the outcome, this kind of outcome. But it's going, if you're going to this kind of campaign, it's going to take a while. And the question is, how many Christians will be left in Lebanon until this campaign ends? Very few. That's the real problem. There is negative immigration from Lebanon. Lebanon is already in a political and economic crisis in the past few years. And I think that's why this was one of the motivations for Hezbollah to create a situation of war with Israel, because that way it will weaken its partners as well. And if it will survive, it will be able to push them out of Lebanon and win the whole game. So there is you're talking of an opportunity, but at the same way, that could be a risk in this as well. And we don't know, we enter to a war, you never know how it's going to end.
Thank you. So as you know, this year is an election year for the United States. I'm sure that this affects Israel's policy, especially when it comes to war in the north. The Biden administration has been very vocal about wanting to keep the conflict in Gaza from widening. How do you think this will affect Israel's strategy when it comes to Hezbollah?
It is a problem. We need to consider the US position here. And I believe that as we talk, there are conversations around that between the Israelis and the Americans, and the Israelis and the French. And we need, as I've said, we need the administration and we need the United States in general on our side in this conflict with Hezbollah. We don't want to do it by ourselves. For so many reasons. Of course, one of them is the fact that it could spread further than that. And the second reason, as I've said, eventually we are the Western Front against Iran here. It's not about Israel and Hezbollah or Israel and Hamas, so it's something much greater than that.
Thank you. So when it comes to the Israeli people, in specifically the residents of the north, are they pressing right now the Netanyahu administration to widen the conflict, to not get involved?
They are pressing Netanyahu to find a solution, and if needed, a military solution. The mayors, today, the mayors went to the Knesset and met Knesset members there. We have a lobby of residents not carrying any official position, lobby 1701. Maybe you can have a webinar with them as well. And they are deep in these demands to the Israeli government to find a safe way to bring the people back. People, young families who saw what happened to young families in the South, are afraid to go back.
What do you think needs to happen? Do you think, I mean, first of all, do you think there's any way that this gets solved peacefully? And if so, what would Hezbollah need to do for that to happen?
I don't think it will get solved peacefully, because I don't believe Hezbollah will take the missiles out of the homes. There may be a diplomatic arrangement. I believe that there will be a diplomatic arrangement because, as you said, this is what everybody wants. Especially the Americans. But diplomatic arrangement is not equal to a solution. And eventually what will happen, to my assessment, and I hope I'm wrong, is that those who have an option among those who evacuees, Israeli evacuees, will not come back. Those who have another economic option to continue to pay the mortgage on their home in the north and at the same time to live elsewhere in Israel will not come back. So who will come back? Those who don't have an option. Those who don't have an option are not the businessmen. And we're going to have a deep crisis, social, economic crisis over here up north, which we are very, very worried about. How our future is going to look like when the north will be populated of people that don't have any other choice but to go back to their homes and fear for their lives. That's one thing. Second is the question of the IDF, meaning we are not 100% sure after what happened in the South that the IDF will protect us. I am saying that painfully because I was an officer in the army and I believe in the Israeli spirit and I believe in the IDF. But something was shaken, something was undermined deeply after October 7th. And we understand that in order to protect us, IDF needs to invest a lot of resources for a long time. So how do you keep the reservists recruited for a long time? These are civilians that had businesses, that had works, that had different kind of life. Imagine yourselves. And all of a sudden they are pulled out of their lives and they are being drafted for months, meaning their businesses don't exist anymore. How can we, this is, it's not even about money, it's about people's life. How do you continue like that for years? You don't. Eventually, IDF will have to let the reservists go home and, keep a different level of presence up north than it is today. How are we going to do that? Exactly. And who will protect us? And how are we going to protect ourselves? So there are many things to be done in the military level as well, to prevent another massacre. But it's a lot of work to be done.
Right. I want to reiterate some of the points that you said. One, I don't know if people picked up on it, but Israel is the eastern outpost of America's national security interests against Iran and all of the Iranian terror proxies. And if Israel's border is shrinking effectively, if people from the north are crowding into the center and people from the south are crowding into the center, it's going to eventually come back to haunt the United States, because whether or not people want to acknowledge it, it's perceived among our enemies that Israel is a Western outpost, an Eastern outpost of Western democracy. And one of the reasons why Israel's resented so much, I think. So it really will come back to bite us in the backside here in the United States if we don't give Israel the military capability to defend themselves by themselves, really. That's just my 2 cents. But Joseph, are there other questions that have come in, or some of your own?
No, but I mean, I have a couple. I'm curious. You mentioned the domestic pressure in Israel and how the situation is untenable for a long time. I'm wondering, there have been many who evacuated from southern Lebanon as well. Is there any sort of domestic pressure there on the Lebanese government, on Hezbollah of any sorts?
No, there is the pressure on Hezbollah is the same pressure that was on Hezbollah before the war, meaning that, people always ask me, what about the Lebanese? What about the Lebanese society? And I cannot talk about the Lebanese in general or the Lebanese society. I have to make fractions of that to the Shiite Lebanese and the Christian Lebanese, or actually those who are with Hezbollah and those who are against Hezbollah. And actually, this didn't change. You still have those who are with Hezbollah and those who are against Hezbollah. And those who are against Hezbollah are not necessarily friends of Israel, but yes, they don't want Lebanon to be involved in a campaign on behalf of Iran. And those who are, or behalf of Hamas, both. Those who are for Hezbollah are saying, we are going to stand for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Israel is committing genocide. And we are going to fight and die and sacrifice ourselves. That's the terminology that they are using. Sacrifice ourselves for the bigger cause. Actually, the bigger cause is to distribute the Islamic Revolution values. That's the bigger cause. So I can't say, people love to say that there is a lot of pressure in Lebanon. If there was a pressure in Lebanon, Hezbollah would give up on the presidency, which it doesn't. If there was a pressure in Lebanon, Hezbollah would stop firing against Israel, which it doesn't. Hezbollah would at least say that it is willing to negotiate an arrangement, which it doesn't. I don't see how this pressure works. It doesn't exist. Moreover, if I'm looking at the Lebanese media, they hardly report the damages in the south. I learned about the damages in South Lebanon from the social media of the towns, of the people in the towns in South Lebanon. You can hardly learn that from the Lebanese media in general, for example. Okay, so today there was a tweet in a kind of an apologetic way, or maybe even blaming way, of one of Hezbollah senior reporters who said, yes, the Lebanese reporters are not coming south, but the international reporters are coming south. They are afraid for their lives. That's why they are not coming south. Well, you don't need reporters to report today. You can use the videos that are on social media like I'm doing. There is, you know, we can say there are difficulties for those who were evacuated in the Lebanese side. This is true. We can say that there is a humanitarian situation for these people, a few tens of thousands of them. This is also true, but does that influence the policy of Hezbollah? This is not happening. I don't see any willingness on the side of Hezbollah to get to a ceasefire. And we can illusion ourselves that there is pressure, but I don't see this happening. They are still shooting at us. That's the bottom line.
So I'd like to move to the calculus of Iran. There was speculation when Israel started its campaign against Hamas in Gaza that Iran was willing to sacrifice Hamas in order to save Hezbollah, meaning that Iran would not want to start a war because it could risk losing a very valuable partner. What do you say to that speculation? Is that still the case? And what do you think Iran's calculus is in general when it comes to Israel's northern border?
I think the Iranians sacrificed Hamas because it was, they made the decision to start the multi-front campaign against the state of Israel, as I've said. And you see this, it's not only against Israel, actually, it's against the Western presence in the Middle East. Israel is part of it. You see the campaign in the Red Sea, you see the campaign in Syria and Iraq and Jordan. Okay, so after saying that, I think that what the Iranians did is sacrificing Hamas in order to understand what's the reaction, what's the tactics of the IDF, what's the response, how international community is behaving around that. But it's not sacrificing Hamas instead of Hezbollah. It's sacrificing Hamas first, okay? Starting from Hamas, and at some point starting getting Hezbollah involved in a certain level and maybe later in a different level. The problem is that we don't play on the same timeline, okay? We have in our Western perception a war that lasts a few weeks, maybe a few months. But Iran has all the time in the world. What's the problem? It can take a few years. And if you want to understand what I'm saying, look at Ukraine. It's war in Ukraine in the past 2 years, and nobody's attacking Moscow. This is what the Iranians are taking from the war in Ukraine.
I think you bring up a good point, as Iranian, military officials have constantly brought up the quote unquote war of attrition that they're waging against Israel. Their proxies have said that as well. Do you think, how long do you think they can really, draw this out before Israel has to strike?
I believe that once Israel is prepared militarily, we'll see a change. But again, at the same time, I believe that Israel wants to have a diplomatic arrangement, even a diplomatic arrangement that is not good enough to my point of view as a resident of the North. And I believe it will end up with a diplomatic arrangement that would mean a ceasefire, that would mean that it's not a solution, that would mean that the initiative to start the war again will stay in the hands of Hezbollah. And this is a dangerous scenario.
Thank you. So we just received a question. We've heard a lot about Hezbollah's missile stockpile. What about their conventional forces and maybe other, means of waging war? Can you discuss that?
Yes, Hezbollah has 50,000 full-time job, I put it this way, military operatives. Out of them, it's around, a few thousand, 3,000, maybe more, of Radwan brigades, which are commando, the Nukhba of Hezbollah. I'm now insulting Nasrallah, but the Nukhba of Hezbollah. The Radwan brigades, the difference from Hamas is that they are not only trained, they're also experienced because they fought in Syria. They came back from Syria to South Lebanon. These are the photos that you see behind me. Other than that, it has a few tens of thousands more, we don't know the exact number, of reservists that are less trained and less professional. Eventually, it doesn't matter, to tell you the truth, it doesn't matter whether it's 50,000 or 30,000. It doesn't matter. It's enough to carry out an offensive plan similar to what Hamas had done. And you saw that in the south as well, it was not only the Nukhba, after them came war, which is, just came in. And even we tend to believe that Hezbollah has more discipline than Hamas. If this kind of scenario will happen, which again, it's not likely that it will happen now because we are much more prepared, but it may happen in the future. It would mean that others can cross, and there is Hamas in Lebanon as well. So, and you saw that you don't need big numbers. 3,000 invaders from 30 areas along the fence, while the communities are next to the border, and IDF is surprised, it's enough to create a lot of damage.
So unlike Gaza, which, for example, is under blockade from Israel and Egypt, southern Lebanon shares a border with Syria that goes to Iraq, that goes to Iran. It's part of that Shia land bridge that is very much under Iranian influence. Could you see Iran shipping other proxies there, like the Fatmiyun, maybe Syrian groups, maybe even, Iranian operatives themselves?
What, to Saudi Arabia?
No, to southern Lebanon.
We know that there is a militia named Imam Hussein that is composed of various nationalities, a lot of Syrians and Iraqis, that's already positioned in South Lebanon.
All right, so this is very, very sobering, but it's very close to home because I have a dear family member fighting with the IDF on the north. And we, hope and pray that there will be no more karbanot. The news of what had happened earlier today is very, very troubling. I want to ask all of our viewers to please contribute to ALMA. It's the ALMA Research and Education Center. You could look it up online. There's a donate now button. Sarit does amazing work up there, and I adore her. And of course, we really do need your contributions to emetonline.org. We're on Capitol Hill every day, trying to fight the good fight, inform people about, as I said before, that Israel is the Eastern outpost of Western democracy. It's in America's best national security interest to have a very strong and very secure Israel and a secure and strong IDF. I am hopeful that the IDF has learned the sobering lessons of October 7th and will keep all of Israel's borders safe and secure and strong, and that Sarit and her beautiful family can go to bed at night without hearing the booms in the middle of the night. And I want to thank all of our listeners who have tuned in. We've had many today, and please come back next week, same time, for another exciting, topical, and timely Emet webinar. Thank you so much, Sarit, for your time, and God should protect you.